Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There are so many different options for students, and I think that the university is doing its best to make them aware of all these opportunities. So that's a great thing, I think, for students today is that there are more resources for them, but there seems to still be some confusion around, how to take advantage of those opportunities and maybe even just some nerves because, the university will put on a networking event and employers will come to a career fair and students will be nervous to go to those events because they haven't done it before. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to encourage students to do and say, hey, it's a little bit uncomfortable, but you might meet someone like you're saying who gives you an opportunity to get a little closer to that dream job or helps you find a dream job for the context like you're saying a dream job for now. So
What I
thank
have seen,
Yeah, go
what I
ahead.
have seen, no, in the same line of thinking on that, right? What I have seen is that students have two tendencies to avoid that. One is procrastination, like the fear is what you mean, like the fear to confront that reality, the reality of that they're going to need a job eventually.
Right.
And the other one is the heavy load amount of courses, homeworks, assignments, and things that they feel that they need to prioritize in order to get a better grade, certification, accreditation, a bachelor degree or whatever, right?
Right.
So that is that combination. It's what I have seen, more or less. That is, but what is clear is that those students that go to those network events, to those job fairs, to those professional development resources, to those classes, to those internships, to those ones are the ones who definitely had a better chance of get a better job, right?
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it just takes stepping out of your comfort zone a little there. So, in terms of how to stand out, when you do take some of these opportunities, let's say it's something like going to a career fair where people might be bringing their resume, to hand off to some of the employers that are there. Have you noticed anything that helps students stand out today when it comes to making resumes or things like that? Is there anything in particular that you think is working for students?
Yes, there is a huge difference between students who try to do this. I mean, I'm making a generalization here, right? To every
Sure.
to every rule, there is exceptions, right? But in general, what I have seen is that a student who look for those resources, students who take professional development classes, a student who goes to, I don't know, LinkedIn courses or that look for some help in that sense, and they are able to put together, let's say, a decent resume, a CV, or cover letter. It made the difference. It made the difference. When the students, same with interview, right? When a student practice interview, have some kind of training with the interview, practice in front of their friends, practice with the in a stage, practice in the classes, practice it. When they practice, then they feel way more comfortable in the moment of talking with an employer, in the moment of introducing themselves, in the moment to start to create that network that everybody agrees that is so necessary to have a career, right? Not only to get one job, but to have a professional career in whatever you're going to try to do.
Yeah.
So yes, there is a huge difference between a sloppy, not sometimes it's not even that is sloppy. Sometimes it's like what do you think as a student that is going to be a good resume? For example, with many colors,
Oh,
it is not, right? It's quite the opposite. So that kind of thing, right? There is tons of resources online and the university and and in many places to how to construct a good resume, right?
Yeah, and what kind of things have you noticed students doing that they should avoid? You know, for instance, using lots of different colors or lots of different fonts by accident or not spell checking things. Um, have you noticed anything that students should avoid doing when it comes to resumes?
Yeah, yes, of course. Um, in class, I say all the time that I know that looks very boring, but resume need to be formal, and as more formal as better. As a resume or a CV is a check facts page, right?
Right.
It doesn't need to be colorful. It doesn't need to be with a nice formatting. Nobody's going to uh, nobody's going to take remember you in a good way because of that, right? If somebody remembers you because of that, it's gonna be a bad way. Like
Okay.
this is not a high school presentation, right?
Right.
This is a professional thing, and when you are an HR person or you are somebody that is looking through application, the last thing that you want to receive is something that doesn't look professional, right?
Yeah.
So need to be professional, need to be one specific font, 12 side. It need to look professional and be professional, right? So, yes, that happened a lot. Yeah.
That's super helpful to know. I think students do that kind of thing, like you said, if they haven't used some of the resources out there. And I think that happens to a lot of job seekers when they enter the kind of workforce looking for jobs. It's so unfamiliar that they don't know some of these things. So they do it by accident and they learn the hard way because they're not getting interviews or they aren't getting the job in some cases, even if they do get the interview. And it's difficult for them to understand why until, you know, we kind of share these stories and tell them what's going on behind the scenes. So let's say that, you know, they have formatted their resume professionally and they do get the interview. What kinds of things have you noticed happen in the interview that might stop a student from getting a job? Like, what kind of things are they doing that, um, you know, is leading to them not getting a second interview or not getting hired? What kind of things there?
Before going to interview part, which I am going right after, just to put something else about the resume.
Yeah.
I know that it's difficult when we're constructing our first resume, CV, or whatever. We want to put everything that we have done, right? Because we think that that is going to show who we are, and that is going to prove to the ultimate to the employer or to the program or whatever that we have been doing a lot of things and we are not been losing our time.
Right.
That is wrong. That is wrong. I know that it's difficult not to do it in that way the first time, but that is absolutely wrong because in the resume or the CV, it should be just what is related to the position or to the thing that you're applying for. That's it. Nothing else. Right? So, well, I want to give that tip that is
That's super
so
helpful.
difficult, that is so difficult in general to go over, right?
Well, you
Uh,
make a good point because I think students go to these career fairs and they hand out, you know, dozens of resumes, but it's the same resume for every company. And to your point, it's not related and they won't hear back from anyone and go, well, I put out a dozen resumes. What happened? And it's what you're saying. It's not, you didn't take that extra effort to make it specific to the job, and someone else probably did, and it makes all the difference.
But if you're going to go to a job fair, for example, right? You cannot create like a resume for each particular company that you're going to see there because you probably not even know what companies are going to be there,
That's a good point, though.
right?
Yeah.
So, but create a resume that is for certain type of position that you want, a general one, don't worry. If it's interesting enough resume, like if your qualifications are good for that position of for that company, or that company is looking for talent, they're going to call you, and you're going to have the opportunity in the interview that we're going to talk now to explain everything there, right?
Great
So
point.
let's go to the interview. Yes, there are many people who go to interview and don't get the position, right? And it's part of the same process. It's part of the process, the application process. And in the same way that the resume is the facts exposure, the cover letter is where you, in some way, construct a narrative about that resume, right? That in some way you explain that resume, in some way you made the announcements and the detail of that resume. The interview is like the presentation, right? The interview, I like when the interviewer and employer, and I always encourage employers to do that when they are going to do like a proper round of interview and that kind of thing, like send the question for the people to be ready and prepare themselves for the interview.
For sure.
Because in that way, it's not anymore about a test. It's not a test, right? It's what we are trying to create in the relationship between higher education and industry. That is like a conversation,
Right?
between equals, where you are trying to hire me, and I am trying to go to your company. Then when that happens in that way, is a very more productive conversation that if it's contributing some way as a test, right? So that is the first element that create a problematic interview for an applicant, is the being nervous.
Right.
How the only way that I have found to don't be nervous about an interview is preparing for it. Preparing, doing your research, knowing what you are going to talk about, and knowing what is the company about, and knowing what is your position about. And when you know all of that, practice that with the program, with the friend, with the professor, with somebody. Practice. When you practice that and you verbalize all the things that you have learned out of your research, then you have a very strong possibility of don't be nervous in the moment of the interview. That is a formal conversation, right? So first, preparation. Second, don't be nervous. And third, and this is what I found very interesting in the interviews. When you have the capacity to read your counterpart, sorry, when you are able to read if it's more formal, less formal, when you get into the flow of the conversation,
Right.
then the interview was spectacular in general.
That makes sense. Yeah, and a question just to play off something you were saying there in terms of preparation. Recently, I've heard about mid-career professionals. So these are folks, they have, worked for 5 to 20 years in their field, but they haven't interviewed for a job in a long time. And there seems to be a tendency with those folks to not want to practice because they've done the work for a long time and they think, oh, I'll just go to the interview. But to your point, they haven't answered questions about their work, at least in that format, for a long time. So I think many of them struggle. So would you advise the same thing to them? Just even if your experience is still worth practicing?
Today, I would advise it even more, because a student that is coming out fresh off university, that is trying to do an interview, the employer still is going to be a little bit more soft, if we want to say,
Right.
right? It's going to be more
Understanding.
Paternal, maternal is going to be more even, because it's easy to read out in that way when it's in fresh students. When you are applying for something that you think that you know how to do, it's even more difficult because your counterpart usually is a person same age, same structure, just with a different job. So it's going to ask you like a proper thing. So it's very difficult when you haven't been in an interview for 20 years or 10 years. That game had changed a lot. That game had changed a lot. And all the, no, but 10 years ago, what was more important in almost every career was the technical skills, right?
Right.
But did you know specifically about this position, how everything technical as much as possible, with some what they used to call at that point like a behavioral
Question, yeah.
questions and that kind of thing. There is not like that anymore. There is not like that anymore. All the research that have been made in the last 5 years prove that employers, what they want more are the transferable skills beside the technical skill. The technical skill, everybody agree that you need to have.
Right.
But that is something that you're supposed to have. If you are in the interview, that means that you are one of the 3, one of the 5 that get to the interview. Everybody have the technical skill.
True.
Right? Especially in a place like Canada or in a place like in the US, where, it's like a technicality is something that we do, right? So what the employers are looking for is for collaboration, team player, adaptability, leadership in some specific positions.
Right.
And transferable skill. It's not the technical skill. So if you are going in an interview after 10 years without being in an interview, and you are not ready for that kind of question, if you haven't practiced that, if you haven't think about that, because the thing with the practice is not like it's not because it's scholastic, right? It's not because the repetition is the mother of knowledge. No, it's because when you practice, you verbalize things and you reflect about it, right? So
100%.
that is the point. That is the point. If you don't verbalize that, if you don't reflect about what are the questions and how you are going to answer that, there is no way that you can do it right. There is no, but maybe you can do it, but it will be deception. It will be exceptional.
That makes a lot of sense, Boris. I'm glad you mentioned it that way because it's true, actually. If a student's just going to their first interview as an employer, you do have a little bit more understanding for them. But if you're hiring for a senior role, you have completely different expectations. So that I've never heard it put that way. It's even more important to practice when you are more experienced because the expectations are different. So I'm really glad you mentioned it that way. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The next question I have kind of about that more advanced stage of things and kind of opportunities that might come our way is, have you noticed any new trends in the workforce that point to job opportunities for students that, we might not have had? What sorts of fields are growing? Where do you kind of see potential opportunities? Has anything like that come to mind for you recently?
I think that this new trend in how workforce is developing and this new very particular and when I say particular, I mean like the individual way that workforce is developing, right? We more and more found small business, medium business, more and more we found, at least in this part of the world, right?
Mm,
more and more we found that the positions are like almost unique in some cases
right,
that answer specifically to some needs that that business have or that institution have, right? Right now, institutions and business are problem solving oriented. They have a problem and they need to solve it, right?
right,
And they hire somebody to solve that problem that they have. So to solve one particular type of problems or one particular problem or something like that, you almost need somebody very specific, and that is what allowed this in some way this personalization of the workforce in many cases. How much we see, like for example, in a junior position right now in the small business, the same person is the person who take to the one that developed the social media part of the business, the one that developed the new ideas or the fresh idea of the business, at the same time that is doing something else, solving
right.
like a very practical problem that they have for whatever reason, right? So
Good
how
point.
all those three things are together solely, and there is no there is not a there is not a discipline for that, right? There is no you know what I mean? Is that
I know what you mean because it's kind of like what you were saying with the transferable skills is kind of previously, at least this is kind of what I'm taking from what you're saying. 20 years ago, you didn't need to know about social media. You could just do your one thing, and let's say it was something technical or coding. You could just do that. But today there's this opportunity to be, you know, someone who can code, but also someone who can contribute to the social media of a company. And the more of these sort of, I guess, more so accessible skills now you can develop, right? You can be pretty good at social media, coding, um, networking, all these sort of things that you didn't have to have before, now kind of wrapped into one person and create pretty interesting opportunities out of having a decent ability in each one of those areas. Is that kind of what you're getting at there?
yeah. That is exactly what I mean. That is exactly you get it perfect because, for example, one of the things that I say to my students in general is like, okay, when you are doing the interview and you did your research about that company, you're applying for this particular position, you can say everything that how you fit in that position, how you fit in the value of that company, and what problem you have identified in that company or that position that you bring the new idea and how to solve. And that is the spectacular, right? That is when employers get like a super
Yeah,
happy with the yeah, because imagine that you have a problem that as an employer, right? As a company, you have a problem, and you are interviewing people for one person to solve your problem, and that person not only is going to solve you that problem, it's going to solve you another problem that you never even thought about.
yeah, just because you've put in that time to think through it and prepare for that conversation, like you were saying.
And you have the skill to solve that particular problem, right? You have that could be related to the position, that could be completely in tune with every, but could be completely different, and it's good too, right? It's good too.
Yeah.
So the this new way of non-linear structure ascendant kind of career is allowing all that possibility that in many ways uh, not only you contribute you contribute with everything that you have to one particular position that somebody is asking for, but you can accommodate yourself in the things that you are interested in in order to make that position more sure than somebody else, right?
Yes.
It's it's like when I imagine in some way, like graphically, I think that we are getting out of the industrial reproduction, repetition kind of industrial age, and
Yeah.
we are more and more in this digital new way that is more and more particular individual, right?
Yeah, it's such an interesting take, Boris, to think about how you can contribute in more than one way because these tools and technologies are making it easier for people to uh, do some of the things that it previously took a specialist to do. For instance, I have a much easier time now making a video or making a poster even than I did,
Mm.
10, 15 years ago. And that's so true. If you have, that interest and drive to learn some of those things, suddenly you can be hired for one thing, but really secure, your position by saying, oh, well, I can jump in and help with that other thing too. And who wouldn't appreciate someone like that on their team? So it's a great point. I'm really glad you mentioned that. And just as we wrap up here, do you have any kind of success stories or, students without naming names, that have kind of applied some of the lessons and things that we've talked about here? Like any wins or stories that might be worth sharing that other students might be able to learn from?
I, I have many. Honestly, not to it's their success, not mine, right? But I have many. I have students that have had secure positions in their dream company right now. They are full time and they are doing and they are, yeah, and they start from the very just having a simple internship there, right? Simple internship, simple application, simple, and then learning there in the process, in the thing, growing up, in the constructing their own network, their own professional career, thinking about that, how, and getting involved in that kind of things. And right now they are full time with the and having a very good time, and right? Yeah, I'm not going to give you any specific name or nothing like that because they're private,
Of course,
but
but that they
but
follow that process, yeah.
yeah.
So
Absolutely.
something simple as, they took the time, like you were saying, probably to research the company they wanted to do the internship at. And then you're saying, they did a good job there, but more than that, they got involved with the company and built a network so that it sounds like when they were done, it was almost easy for the company to
It's
want
easy.
them back.
It's
Yeah,
easy. It's easy because most of companies don't have big HR departments. Most of companies, especially in GTA, especially in this area, for example, for agriculture, agri-food, environmental, all that kind of careers here, eh, that that we are having, this is the hope for that, right? So in those, like for a farm or like for a consulting environmental company, those companies, unless they are very big, they don't have HR departments. So somebody have to dedicate time, that could be time on the field, to do the search for a new position, for a new employer. When
right,
you have three interns that have been doing this job, you already have a pool of three potential employees, right?
right.
So you don't even have to publish the position. You don't even have to ask to your friends. You don't even you save a lot of time, money, effort, energy, right? So
Such a good point.
that is the main resources that small and medium companies and business are using right now in a way of securing and knowing and prepare their workforce. Is that is through volunteering, internships, small internships, pay internships, co-op, that kind of thing, right? Work integrate learning is what they are, is how we call it in education, right? Uh, is how they are doing that. Is how they are doing that. It's saving them time and money.
Well, that
So
makes a lot of sense, and it's a good reminder to students who have thought about doing co-op or internships. What an amazing avenue to learn about a company and potentially, you know, skip the line in terms of applicants. You get yourself in there, you make a, you work hard, and it will pay off just because you're actually adding much more value than I would have even thought. You're not just doing the job, you're making it easier for them to figure out who's going to do the job, you know, ongoing.
when
So, yeah.
with those opportunities, you have the opportunity to become an insider, right? When
Yeah,
you're inside, you have advantage for sure.
big time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, Boris. We're just about a minute from wrapping this up. So
Thank
I
you
just
for
want to say,
inviting me.
thank you for sharing the insights. I had a feeling you would have some great stories to tell, and I'm really glad we got to hear some of them. So, yeah, thank you on behalf of the whole team here.
Let me tell you before we finish. The students of mine that used the in stage in last term, they were very happy with it. They had a
Fantastic.
very good experience. They had a very good experience with it. Yeah,
Oh, that's so good to hear. I hope they continue to enjoy it. There's tons of new features that they'll be able to try soon. So, we'll keep making sure they enjoy the experience.
that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Boris. You have a great rest of your week there, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you. You too. Have a
All
good
right.
one. Bye.
Bye.